Hey guys, Mitch with Shock Therapy, and today we're going to be showing you how to install the spring kit on the Yamaha Wolverine RMAX. This spring kit's going to do a couple of different things for you. Number one, it's going to add the extra ground clearance that you're looking for rock crawling specifically. With the added ride height from the spring kit, this also allows you to add more weight to the vehicle. So if you're out trail riding or you're in the woods, hunting, anything like that, you actually have the ability to load up the back of the bed without the factory springs sagging. Lastly, the spring kit does add some plushness to the car, which everybody's always looking for. This video goes in depth of all the ride height changes and adjustments that are necessary when trying to complete this task. This install should take you about 2 to 3 hours. So let's jump on in. I'm going to show you guys how to install it.
With the shocks removed from the vehicle, you can insert the shock into the spring compressor and begin compressing the springs. Make sure to move your bump stop down about 3 to 4 inches using a flathead screwdriver. Remove the lower spring perch from the shock and remove the lower spring. Remove the plastic nylon divider along with the upper spring. Once the springs are removed, you can insert the shock into a vise to begin setting your preload and crossover measurements. If the crossover that comes in the kit is assembled, make sure to disassemble it so that you have the two pieces ready to be installed onto the shock. With a hammer and a flathead, loosen the preload collars to begin setting your preload measurement. Set the preload collar to 4 1/4 inches. Okay guys, so a little pro tip here for you. The crossovers that you guys are going to receive are actually going to be a 2-piece crossover versus the ones that we have on here right now. These are just going to be for the video purpose of showing you guys where the measurement is actually located at. Yeah, so basically in the kit you're going to have the 2-piece crossover. This would actually be unbolted from each other. You're going to clamshell it to the shock and then use the hardware to tighten it up at the measurement that we're going to show you guys here soon. Once the crossover is installed onto the shock, and then take the O-ring that's also provided in that, go over, and then it would sit right against the crossover that was bolted to the shock itself. Install the 2-piece crossover onto the shock and set your crossover measurement to 7 1/2 inches. Make sure to install the rubber O-ring to the crossover into the recessed groove of the crossover itself. With the preload and crossover set, you can now install the shock into the spring compressor and begin installing the spring kit. Starting with the upper spring, make sure that the numbers imprinted on the spring are actually upside down. This will in turn have them right side up when the shock is on the vehicle. This is also going to reuse the factory divider as well. Install the plastic nylon divider with the long end facing up. Install the lower spring with the imprinted numbers facing downward. Make sure to clock the spring ends 180 degrees from each other. You can now compress the spring system to install the lower spring perch onto the shock. Remove the shock from the spring compressor and repeat these steps on the opposite front shock. With preload and crossover set on the front shocks, as well as the spring kit installed, it is now time to move to the rear shocks. Insert the shock into the spring compressor and begin compressing the springs to remove the lower spring retainer. Don't forget to move the bump stop down 3 to 4 inches using a flathead screwdriver. Remove the lower spring retainer, the plastic adapter, and the lower spring. Next, remove the plastic nylon divider along with the upper spring. Remove the shock from the spring compressor and insert it into a vise to begin the preload and crossover measurements. Set your rear preload collar adjustment to 3/4 of an inch. So for the rear setup on the crossover itself, it's going to apply the same as the front. You're going to have a 2-piece crossover that's going to be provided in the kit for you guys. We're going to give you the exact measurement that is the starting point, but you're going to have this crossover instead of the one that you're seeing on the shock here. Install the 2-piece crossover onto the shock body and set it to 2.5 inches. When the crossover is set, install the rubber O-ring into the recessed groove of the crossover itself. Using a hammer and a flathead screwdriver, make sure to tighten the preload collar. Move the shock to the spring compressor and begin installing the spring kit. Starting with the upper spring first, make sure the numbers are facing down. Okay guys, so on the rear shock, you're going to reuse the factory divider that comes on it. The only difference is the long side of the divider is actually going to face towards the crossover, so make sure you put that on the correct way. Next, install the lower spring and make sure the numbers are facing downward. Don't forget to clock the spring ends 180 degrees from each other. And you guys are also going to reuse the factory retainer holder that comes off the lower part of the shock. That's going to go back on with the new spring kit as well. Decompress the spring system and repeat these steps on the opposite rear shock. Using the factory hardware, you can now prepare to install the rear driver's side shock. Okay guys, so another pro tip for you, make sure that the reservoir is facing towards the vehicle, not towards the back of the vehicle. That is important as well. Yep. Insert the top bolt, followed by the nut on the back side. Next, install the lower bolt, followed by the nut. With the rear driver's side shock installed, you can now repeat these steps on the opposite passenger side rear shock. With both rear shocks installed, you can now lower the vehicle back to the ground. Jack up the front of the car and begin the installation of the front shocks. Okay guys, so on the front shocks, it does not matter which side that these are actually installed. There's no specific orientation of left or right, so don't worry about that when you go to put these back on. Using the factory hardware, you can now install the front passenger shock. Insert the bolt, followed by the nut on the back side. Next, install the lower bolt, followed by the nut on the back side. With the passenger front shock installed, you can now repeat these steps on the opposite driver's side front shock. With both front shocks installed onto the vehicle, you can now lower it back to the ground to begin the ride height process. With your designated driver in the vehicle, make sure to drive the vehicle forward and backwards a couple of times to settle the suspension. Make sure to come to a coasting stop without hitting the brakes. With your driver remaining in the vehicle, you can now check the ride heights. The ride height in the front should be measured at 13 inches. This measurement is taken from the lower control arm tab closest to the firewall to the ground. Next, measure your rear ride heights. This measurement should be 13 inches from the bottom of the frame to the ground. With your ride height set correctly, you can now check the crossover gap measurement, making sure that it is set to 2 inches in the rear. When that is set correctly, you can move to the front shocks, making sure that it is also set to 2 inches. This measurement is measured from the bottom of the crossover to the top of the plastic nylon divider. With your ride heights and crossover measurements established, you can now tighten all of the hardware holding the shocks to the vehicle, and your installation is complete.
We hope that this video helped you guys with the installation of your spring kit at home. As always, we recommend to check the ride height after the first 100 to 300 miles and adjust accordingly. Something to keep in mind is that ride heights are always a moving target. If you're adding or subtracting weight, we always recommend to stay within those targeted numbers for your ride height settings. Setting your ride heights and making sure they are correct is extremely important. We're going to give you guys a link in the description below to our KRX video, which goes in full depth of how to adjust these ride heights and crossover settings. This spring kit, along with all of our other spring kits, are made in the USA, and they do come with a lifetime warranty. If you like the spring kit, we do have the RIS system that also goes along with the Wolverine. The Ride Improvement System brings out the ultimate ride quality in the Wolverine that it is known for. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel and hit the bell to be notified anytime that we post a new video. If you'd like to order this spring kit or any other products that we offer, visit the website at shocktherapyusa.com. For any technical help, feel free to give us a call at 623-217-4959.
Ready, Freddy?
Cool. My dad's gonna ground me now.
Nice light placement, Josh. Jesus. One job.
God.
Try it out there, bud. I'm gonna jump on in. Where do I go after that? As always, I stumbled. I like twitched.
You did kind of twitch.
Lars! Getting fired up. The Ride Improvement System brings out the ultimate ride quality that the Wolverine is known for. Just stab him. The Ride Improvement System brings out the ultimate...